Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Utter Punts. I'm your host Olly, joined as ever by the Brummie Viking Dave Keane and the Draft Connoisseur Jim. Sorry for the delay in between videos. I decided to take a holiday to Milan, so it's on me. So yeah,
Pretending to be Italian, were you, Ollie?
that's why I got the hair like this. So we've finally entered draft week. The 2024 NFL draft starts early Friday morning in the UK for us. So, boys, last night you were having a discussion about who do you think is going to go in the top areas of the draft, and you had very conflicting arguments for where people are going to go. So I'm going to hand it over to you, boys. What's your thoughts on draft week? Are you excited?
Oh, I was so excited. I love this time of year. But you're quite right. Jim and I do not agree on what's going to happen at the top of the draft. Not necessarily at the number one pick. I think we agree that Caleb Williams is going to go number one overall simply because the Bears can't not take him based on the way the entire draft cycle has gone. Like to do so, to not take him, and then if he went anywhere else and was successful, well, that would be career suicide for Ryan Poles. So I think we agree that Caleb's going at number one. That's right, Jim?
Yeah, man. I don't think we can argue that too much. All the signs point to Caleb at that one, and I know we know Dave's thoughts on Caleb as a prospect. And I mean, to be fair, my thoughts on him as a prospect are fairly similar, but at the same time, we covered it in the last video. I'm not capable of an independent thought, and I'm buying into the media hype on Caleb Williams. So yeah, we'll just wait and see what happens. But yeah, me and Dave have got quite different views on how the draft's gonna go on Thursday night, Friday morning. This used to be called the Cleveland Browns Christmas. Was draft time. That's not the case now because obviously we've got my favourite quarterback that's cost us those 3 first-round picks. So I'll get to sit there and watch you Vikings fans sweat it out. Well, it depending on where you actually end up picking. I'm just praying for a trade up to 5 and a Bo Nix selection just for banter purposes, to be honest. But yeah, we've got quite different views on how we see that sort of top 5 picks sort of working out.
Well, if anyone wants to see Jim's thoughts on the Browns, go back to our Stefan Diggs video, weirdly, and he explains it all in a rant at the end there.
Completely unprovoked.
It's a constructive one-way discussion.
Constructive one-way discussions, otherwise known as rants. Yeah. Anyway, so at number 2, I think we both agree that it's either going to be Jaden Daniels or probably JJ McCarthy now, who's looking more like for Washington as a potential one, just simply because apparently Jaden Daniels is a little bit unhappy with the pre-draft process with the Commanders. Allegedly, meetings haven't gone well, but it's lying season, right? So we don't really know.
The Commanders took an interesting approach to their evaluation of the top 4 quarterbacks. They brought all 4 in on the same day, which, I mean, I get it from seeing it, one versus another in person. But in terms of your potential franchise cornerstone for the next 10 to 15 years, it doesn't really show that you're making an effort. It's kind of like going on a date, but taking your pals. It's not really, it might be good. It might be good for the Bears, but it's not a good idea when you're trying to woo your partner for the next sort of 15.
Jim, it's the Commanders. It's like taking your missus on a date to Mackey's for the first time.
Yeah, solid point. To be honest with you, I take that completely. But yeah, Adam Schefter from ESPN was saying the other day that he doesn't think that Daniels maybe doesn't want to go to the Commanders. I mean, if you could show me a quarterback that does want to go to the Commanders, I'd be surprised, to be honest with you. At the end of the day, that's the beauty of the draft. You don't really get a choice. For me, it's going to be Jaden Daniels at 2. I can't see it being anybody else. JJ McCarthy's a decent shout. To be honest, he's the fastest riser in this whole draft process. Gone from probably early second, late first, all the way up into a top 5 pick now, which again is either masterful Jim Harbaugh mind games or there is genuine something there. We've seen him. I like him. So I think it's an interesting one, but in terms of overall prospects, it's got to be Daniels at 2 for me.
Very fair.
And then we diverge at pick 3, don't we, Dave? Massively.
We do hugely. You see, I don't believe that the New England Patriots believe that they're ready for a quarterback yet. I think they've actually got some quite smart people in their back room now. They've got a coach who's going to be given at least 3 years of this thing. So I think that unless they get given an offer they can't refuse, a true Godfather offer, that they're not going to be trading away from the third pick. But they're not going to take a QB. I think they're going to take Marvin Harrison Jr., number 3 overall. And I think they're going to do this because they need to build weapons, something that the Patriots haven't really had since Gronk left them. Is a true number 1 target. And I think that when you're building your team, the last thing that you want to do is put pressure on a quarterback who isn't going to have enough around them to help them out. So start by building that team. So I think they'll stick there. I think they're going to take the first wide receiver off the board, and I think that's going to throw the draft into all sorts of chaos.
While I don't agree, I can see it's not like it's out of the realms of possibility, right? What I would say is if they don't take a quarterback with their first pick, they're going to have to trade up with their second round pick. I would have thought to try and get someone like Penix Jr. or Bo Nix if they start to fall into the 20s. So it's not completely out of the question. But for me, this is where I have JJ McCarthy going to the Patriots. I just think it's ironic, really. They obviously jettisoned Matt Jones and are now in a position where they have to draft a quarterback at some point, arguably to start. Otherwise, they're starting Jacoby Brissett for the season, which isn't necessarily.
I don't think they mind that.
It's not horrific. I mean, he started a good 10 games for the Browns, I think it was, a couple of years ago. And he was relatively capable. You wouldn't want to. I'm not sure you'd want to invest your entire season in Jacoby Brissett, but he's a very high-end backup, so and well-liked. So it's not out of the question. But I do see it as a little ironic if they do pick JJ McCarthy and they've got rid of Matt Jones, because I think there's quite a lot of similarities there with Matt Jones coming out of Alabama at that point to JJ McCarthy now. Obviously, Matt Jones got picked around number 15, I think it was. So I think he was very hard done by in New England. Obviously, he's gone to Jacksonville now with a chance to back up Trevor Lawrence, but there's a lot of similarities there from when he came out of Alabama to JJ McCarthy. I think he went at number 15, Matt Jones, that is. And yeah, I mean, I just think it'll be ironic if the Patriots do select JJ McCarthy, because I don't really see it as a direct immediate upgrade. I think they probably could have upgraded the scheme around Matt Jones and probably done something similar this year as they would do. And then they would be in a position to take most people's number 1 overall talent in the draft, as Dave would pick in Marvin Harrison Jr. My question on Marvin Harrison Jr. is he the number 1 wide receiver prospect in the draft? Because what I've been reading is a lot about Malik Neighbors.
Well, yeah. And Malik Neighbors, for me, is going to be the player that goes next in the draft. I've got the Cardinals taking him at 4. It is the Cardinals, right?
It is the Cardinals, yeah.
I'm just making sure. Right, so yeah, Cardinals taking him at number 4. I think there are 3 wide receivers that are considered to be head and shoulders above everybody else at that position in this draft. You've got Marvin Harrison Jr., who has got the pedigree. His father was a Hall of Famer, right? Like, exceptional player. And I have heard people saying that his son is going to be better than him, which that's remarkable. Then you've got Neighbors, who looks like he would have been the number 1 overall wide receiver in probably the last 4 or 5 draft classes, and that includes draft classes that had Justin Jefferson, who didn't go number 1, CD Lamb, and Jamar Chase. which is remarkable praise indeed. But it appears that he has everything. He's got athleticism, he's got roof running, he's got contested catch. He's got an excellent catch radius. So yeah, he's an exceptional player as well, which is why I think these wide receivers are actually getting to the point where people are coveting them maybe more than they are the two QBs outside the top two in this draft. That's why I think it's going to go this way. And now we're creating a situation, of course, where there's only one of the top three wide receivers left on the board, with the Chargers sitting there at number 5. So for me, that's why I think this top 5 is not going to be the QB heavy one that everyone thinks. I think it's going to be 2 QBs, 3 wide receivers.
And it's a really interesting shout, to be fair. I think with Neighbours, he's getting a lot of buzz as saying that scouts and some of the team personnel prefer him to Marvin Harrison Jr. And that's just based on his yards after the catch ability. So he's a creator. I think he's very much in the mould of Odell Beckham Jr. in a lot of sense, in that sense too. So yeah, he could end up going higher than people think. I think the Arizona Cardinals wouldn't be too disappointed with either Neighbours or Marvin Harrison Jr. But yeah, so I think ultimately for me, I've got the Cardinals taking Harrison Jr. and that's just because I'm going 1, 2, 3 on quarterbacks. At number 4, Harrison Jr. At number 5 to the Chargers. If the Chargers are sticking and picking, then I expect it to be Neighbours. I do think that's the hot spot for a trade up, though. I think the Giants.
I do too, but I've got an interesting little trade to get into when you're finished talking yours through, because I've got one in mind that I think might well happen.
I think the Giants are trying to scare people into trading up ahead of them. It's really interesting because if the draft goes down how you mentioned in terms of Harrison Jr. at 3, Neighbours at 4, and Romeo Aduns at 5, then that leaves the Giants with a pick of 2 quarterbacks at 6. Who are they going to take? If it's McCarthy and May on the board, I think they'd probably take McCarthy. To be honest with you, and once you get past the Giants, it's plain sailing all the way down to number 11 for the Vikings pick. To be honest with you, so there may be, if it does fall like that, and I think that's probably best case scenario for the Vikings. If 2 quarterbacks get past the 5th pick, as it will just drive the price down a little bit. If you do need to trade up, or ultimately one of them could well end up falling all the way to 11. As I was saying to you yesterday, I don't think it's a case of the Vikings having to go and get their quarterback. I think they have to beat the other teams to get their quarterback, because I think with the Raiders and Broncos at 12 and 13, them trading up it is a real threat. Obviously, it's going to probably cost them their first round pick next year, so they're going to have to love a quarterback, one of those 2 quarterbacks that falls outside. And if they don't, then like we say, best case scenario, it falls. Drake May falls to 11, and the Vikings get a steal, and they get to keep their 23 and their first for next year, which is the ideal scenario. I just can't see it falling like that personally.
So for me, I think the pressure of those top 3 wide receivers, Dunze being the other one, who's another exceptional prospect, who probably would have been challenging for the top wide receiver in previous 3, 4, 5 draft classes as well. I think the fact that pressure point will take place based on the theory of Harrison Jr. going at 3. What I think is going to happen is the Falcons are going to want to move up, get another weapon for their new shiny quarterback that's definitely not going to flop. I think the Giants, who have positioned themselves where, in the way that you're saying, suggesting they might take a QB, I don't think they're actually interested. I think they have to give Jones one more go. I just don't think they've got a choice, because otherwise, why did you sign him to such a long, lucrative contract a year and a half ago? It makes no sense.
You're not paying $40 million for a quarterback on the hot seat. Do you know what I mean?
So suddenly, what you've got there is the Chargers who are sitting there in 5th. Now, the Chargers, and this is the trade that I was talking about. The Chargers potentially want the 11 and the 23 from the Vikings, right? So they really want the Vikings to bite and move up at this point. However, what they're also going to have is a desire of their own to be able to take a top wide receiver and a top O lineman, because whatever happens, they need to be able to protect Herbert. So I think there's two players at this point that they don't mind taking. One of them is Adunze. The other is arguably the top lineman in the draft, and that is Joe Alt, right?
Yep.
So they're sitting there with two players in mind. Directly behind them, you've got the Giants, who are going to be desperate for a top wide receiver. So in order to trade back one spot with the Giants, what can they potentially pick up? If they think that they can pick up a pick which will allow them to take a wide receiver or move up to take another wide receiver, and I've got a feeling that a few people like either, is it Michael Thomas Jr. and Leggett as well, are also two wide receivers who are potentially first rounders. So maybe they're happy with that consolation prize in terms of wide receiver. But they're also, because this is a very wide receiver heavy draft, they might have their eye on a couple of other wide receivers. And the Chargers at the moment don't have a wide receiver core. But we also know that they want to be run heavy because it's a hardball team. So for me, there's the potential here that they basically are actually targeting Joe Alt, right? They have backup options at wide receiver. Now, the market has created this additional pressure now. So you've got the Falcons who want a wide receiver. Who's at 7? Is it the Titans?
Yep.
Right, the Titans want a wide receiver. So now you've got teams at 6, 7, and 8, all of whom want wide receiver. Right? Only one of them can get it. So there, I think the Chargers have got the opportunity to move back a spot or two, pick up the top O lineman still, and get themselves in a position to take another wide receiver of their choice further back. Or they finally accept the fact that the Vikings offering them 11 and 23 will allow them to essentially do similar. But I think that's just moving them a little bit out of position, which is why they're desperate for the Vikings to include next year's first. I don't think the Vikings are going to be willing to do that unless Jaden Daniels is available. I think he's the quarterback that they actually want on account of the way that the Vikings off-season search seems to have gone, which is they brought in every other quarterback in the top 5 for visits and for private training sessions, and only brought in Jaden Daniels when he asked publicly. Like, I think they were not interested in doing that, potentially because they thought it was a surefire thing to go to the Commanders. But the fact that he came out and asked publicly why there's been no interest from the Vikings, it drew attention to it. So it's like they brought it full circle. I think there's just so much market pressure based on the fact that I think people believe there are 3 elite number 1 wide receiver targets in this draft that people appear to be more sure of than they do any other players outside of Caleb Williams, who everybody seems certain on.
I do know what you're saying. I think for me, the only issue I have with that is when you look at those picks at 7 and 8, especially with the Titans and the Falcons, they've got other needs. You've just paid everyone's favourite quarterback, Kirk Cousins, $47.5 million a season or whatever it is.
I'm aware they've got Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, some weapons there.
I'm not in on the Falcons for a wide receiver. I think they're desperate for a pass rusher, to be honest with you, and I think this is probably where you could see the first sort of defensive player come off the board in the draft is to the Falcons. I think at 7, the Titans are in need of
a pass rusher in this draft worth a top 10. There's a lot of mid to later first round pass rushers. Is there really one in this draft who's worth a top 10
It's the
pick?
kid from Alabama. What's he called? Dallas Turner.
Is he worth a top 10 pick? Don't get me wrong, I think he's a quality player, but and positional value might push him in there to be.
I think it's the testing numbers, to be honest, because I think he ran a 4.440 at the combine.
He was light, though.
Yeah, but it's one of those that always seems to peak. It's the athleticism it peaks the general manager's interest.
Nico Smith, the Eagles, one of their many first round picks that they had a year or two ago. Was it Nico Smith, the really, really quick but undersized edge rusher they took? Let me check his name. I'm pretty sure that's correct. I might be wrong though, because hazy memory.
if the quarterbacks fall, though, like you were saying, so if it goes 3 wide receivers and there's a quarterback left, and you get to
Well, I've got 2 names for you, like Will Levis,
but
Malik Willis.
if it gets to 9 and no quarterback's been taken, could you see maybe the Falcons trading with the Broncos or the Raiders, maybe taking Dallas Turner there, getting a couple of extra picks, and then the Broncos and the Raiders going for a quarterback?
Well, obviously, the later it gets, the cheaper it gets, right? So if you're going from 11 to 8, then it might cost you your third this year and not a third this year and a third next year, or a second next year and a fourth this year, or something like that. Whereas, obviously, if you're going from 11 to 4, 3, 4, 5, 3, I think it's going to cost you 3 first-round picks. 5's going to cost you 2 first-round picks and maybe a 4th. And you might get a 6th or a 7th back.
Well, the Chargers apparently want 3 from us at this point, which is why I think. And also, you've got the question of who is it that the Vikings want. I mean, I know we're talking a lot about the Vikings, but the Vikings do kind of hold the key to this draft.
He's the most interesting team in this draft by a long way, to be honest with you, because I think most of the people's drafts live and die by whether the Vikings trade up for a quarterback or sit tight and wait for one, because I think I will caveat that and say sitting tight and waiting for one wouldn't be my preferred option. I think if there's one there and you can get there for 11 and 23, that's what Kwesi made the trade for 23. Just go and get him.
I think there is one little thing that the Vikings might be waiting on, and the rest of the league is also waiting on. And I know it kind of gets dismissed as being a thing, but Kirk Cousins openly acknowledging at his press conference that he chatted with multiple officials from the Falcons and even potentially visited them before the legal tampering period opened does have precedence. So there have been several forced trades between teams in the past over tampering. The conditions around which the commissioner can take action and assesses the level of penalty that should be applied have the following categories. So, when the tampering took place, how often tampering took place, who took part in the tampering, and whether or not they did so with the team's knowledge. So, for example, with the Kyle Pitts thing, him tweeting out that he wanted Kirk to join, that only is a transgression if the team knew that he was doing that, which they did, because he said that he'd already checked with the team and Kirk could potentially take his number 8. So, right, so this is all a little bit murky, and I don't know how true some of the reports are that I've read. Let's get that out there. This is all allegedly until such a time as the NFL investigation finishes. But Kirk did speak about meeting with a physical trainer. I wouldn't have thought they would have signed him without doing a medical assessment on his Achilles. Basically, from the look of it, it would appear that potentially that they have basically infringed the Vikings' exclusive negotiating period, right? Regardless of who triggered it, if it was the Falcons or Kirk, right? Now, the last time there was a major tampering scandal, it was to do with Sean Payton and Tom Brady being tapped up by the Dolphins. The Dolphins lost the first-round pick, the 22nd overall pick, and a third-round pick, and I think a fifth-round pick as well.
Wasn't Flores the head coach at the time when that was going on? The tampering.
I can't recall. I do know it might well have been because it was before Mike McDaniels was brought in. Now. Yeah. And obviously Flores wasn't part of that because you wouldn't be tapping up his own replacement, right? So they basically got punished quite harshly, and they didn't even sign any of the actual players or officials who were the target of the tampering, which is another condition which triggers harsher penalties. If the team actually signs the player that was tampered with, that ups the level. Now, another thing which gets taken into account is the value of the guaranteed money in the contract signed. Kirk has $100 million guaranteed.
Somehow.
There has been no precedent, and it's $150 million, $60 million contract over 4 years, right?
More than that.
There's never been a precedent of the scale of transgression that has apparently taken place here. If the NFL want teams to take their actual rules and regulations seriously, then stealing a franchise quarterback, which is apparently what has gone on here. Oh, thank you so much, Falcons. Which is apparently what has gone on here. Basically should lead to very, very harsh punishments. Now, normally when the teams, because what happens is, from based on previous precedent, Goodall gets the teams to negotiate what will be a fair settlement, right? And the idea is that if they can come to a fair settlement, then they will do so. And they will basically exchange picks or give each other picks to the point where it is considered that transgression has been paid off. If that can't happen, nothing will happen this year in the draft in terms of the actual judgment on that transgression. It's more likely that Goodall and the commissions around the NFL, because this has happened in the past, will basically sit in ruling over the next year and then decide what should happen in next year's draft, right? So in order not to have that hanging over you, there is a driver for the Falcons and the Vikings to come to some form of agreement pre-draft. I cannot see the Vikings accepting anything less than a first-round pick swap.
Could you?
And if that's the case, the Vikings move up to 8. And because I genuinely believe that with the weight of this penalty and the potential ramifications that could occur for the Falcons in the future, unless they do accept some form of punishment for this, it might not be the 11 that the Vikings give them. They could be moving up 15 spots in the first round from 23 to 8.
I understand that, and I think I follow all of the logic. The only things I'd say is when the Dolphins lost their pick, they lost their pick. They didn't trade. It wasn't given to.
But that was because the other team didn't lose. Basically, if there wasn't the rules and regulations are the picks can only be handed over. At least this is where I'm reading it. I've been through the whole thing. The picks can only be handing over if a tampered personnel or tampered player signs for the offending club.
And I think when you look at the precedent for the punishments for these kind of infractions in the recent past and things, most of it happens in draft week. So if it is going to happen, it's going to happen in the next 4 days or so, prior to Thursday night. So it'll be interesting to watch that happen. Ultimately, if the Falcons, let's just say hypothetically, they do swap the 8 and the 11, I don't think it changes much for the Falcons, to be perfectly honest with you. I think they're still in hitting distance for a top offensive lineman and a top defensive lineman in the draft. So ultimately, it's probably within, if that is the case, then in terms of getting this matter settled, and not having, because I mean, like you said, realistically, they could face losing their first round pick next year. It might not go to the Vikings, whereas actually here you could drop 3 places, or
15,
or 15,
or hand over a top second round pick. What I'm saying is, if there's a deal struck over this heinous crime that the Falcons committed, stealing our franchise quarterback, I mean, I was deeply upset. Most Vikings fans were deeply upset. In fact, Roger, Mr. Goodall, sir, it's had a damaging impact on our psyche. So please, sir, punish those big bad men.
I think Ollie's big smile's probably saying it didn't have that damaging an effect, but
it did for some. It did for some Vikings fans. Some of them got so upset. Honestly,
more than the majority, Jim. Don't take my smile into account, Mr. Goodell.
but genuinely, they need to do something, because otherwise, teams can just tamper. Teams can tamper, and at the unveiling press conference, the player who's been tampered with can tell everybody that he's been tampered with, and no one cares.
Yeah, and I think that's a real risk that the NFL is running. So I can see there being a punishment if it goes how you guys obviously want it to go. Then that would be great, and obviously make for, again, really interesting viewing. Because if the Vikings do end up with 8-11, for example, you're not, that's enough to trade up to number 2. In reality,
and then we genuinely get the quarterback of our choice.
Yeah, and I think
which would be massively interesting to see if we did get up to number 2, because I imagine the Commanders would fancy having 8 and 11. If we did get up to number 2, then we will truly see who it is that Kevin O'Connell thinks is the best QB.
Ball game having 8 than 23, because again you're ahead of the Bears with their second first rounder who've got number 9. So yeah, realistically, whole different ball game. It also would mean that you guys would have a bit of leverage to get something back in the trade. So if you were trading 8 and 11 for, say, number 5 to the Chargers, maybe you can get, maybe it's 8-11 and a 4th rounder for a second for number 5 and a second rounder or something like that.
It opens it all back up.
It does open it all back up. But I think it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out over the next 4 or 5 days. Obviously, the Cousins thing was laughable, to be honest with you, to actually sit there. It's just brazen and arrogant to come out and do and say what was said, and the way the Falcons have handled it. I would say I don't think the commissioner enjoys punishing some of the poorer teams in the league, such as the Falcons over the last few years. He's normally focused his efforts on teams who are at the top, like the Patriots or the Dolphins.
It's a parity league. I have to stop them somehow.
So there is that question mark. But I mean,
it's all about precedence for me. That's the key. Like, they have to set a precedent. There has to be some form of punishment. If it isn't, then basically their regulations around free agency and around franchise players, he's leaving it looking like they mean nothing.
It breaks the wheel, and I think when you consider this is an ownership-run league as well, like they have owners' meetings and stuff like that, a billionaire doesn't like having egg on his face. And I wouldn't say the Vikings have got egg on their face, but the way that the Falcons have gone about it is enough to poke a bear, to be honest with you. And if your owner gets in Goodall's ear, or I'm sure he already has been, and yeah, realistically, Goodall's under pressure to do something about this, because otherwise it breaks the wheel. And when there's another renegotiation of the players' rights deals and stuff like that, all of this will have to be taken into consideration. Do they want to get rid of the 2? There's a 2-day legal tampering period for a reason.
They announced his signing on the morning of it.
I think it was open about 90 seconds before Kirk Cousins was physically announced. Yeah.
And he's a 36-year-old quarterback coming off a torn Achilles. You're really going to commit $100 million guaranteed money to him without having checked out his medicals? No. Really? Come on, guys. You made it obvious. You made it obvious in an attempt to get a splash through, and you deserve to be punished for basically being stupid. But then you've also signed a biggest problem with Kirk Cousins. He's not a clever man. So I like to think they made good.
He's made a lot of money for not a clever man, though.
He's got the best agent in the business. My God, I would sign my.
His agent should be negotiating world peace right now.
His agent deserves the opportunity to get him a Hall of
Fame. To be fair, I think.
Has there ever been an agent put in the Hall of Fame?
No,
not even Jerry Maguire.
No, not even Jerry Maguire. But Kirk Cousins, his agent, is one for those for sure.
Do you know what? He deserves some props, doesn't he? Let's actually put his name out there.
Congrats, Kirk's agent.
Hold on, I'm going to give you his actual name. Right, Mike McCartney.
Not Mike McCartney, then, not the Cowboys.
No. Mike McCartney. Well done, sir. Hall of Fame.
Mike McCartney from the Utter Punts. Well done, sir.
We salute you, man. We salute you.
Right, so boys, we've talked about a lot of the surprises that could happen from 2 down, because a lot of people have said basically, Caleb's going at 1, and then from 2 down, it's a crapshoot.
4 QBs, it's going to be 4 QBs.
We don't really know, but I'm asking you, is there any chance, no matter how slim, that Caleb Williams doesn't go at number 1?
No.
I don't think look. You know my feelings. Should it go at number one unquestionably without anybody challenging it? I don't believe so. I'm massively interested in who his agents are as well, because they seem to have done an incredible job of keeping any debate around it completely out of the media.
Mike McCartney.
If it is, oh my god. The other thing I'll say is any NFL teams out there, Mike McCartney's smarter than you. Don't deal with him. Anyway, so hire him as your GM. Anyway, so the truth of it is, it seems to be a predetermined thing. Anyone who's seen the high quality, although weirdly cut and directed movie Draft Day will know that a certain number one overall pick shouldn't always be a certain number one overall pick. Caleb Williams, did your teammates go to your birthday party?
Well, speaking of Draft Day, I was looking at Netflix the other day, and they finally added it onto the UK version, like the other day. So I'm gonna watch it. I've never seen it, so.
Oh no! Wait, that's our Draft Day
That's
watching.
traditional.
Mate.
That's Thursday night viewing. That is, mate.
Thursday night.
Yeah, we watched Draft Day before the draft.
Wicked. We'll do that.
In terms of Caleb not going number one, there's no chance he's not going number one.
He's going number one 100%.
Is it necessarily?
Well, I say 100%. It's 99.9999% because nothing in life
is it guaranteed 100%. Chicago don't trade down?
Yeah.
Yes. After Justin Fields is let go, yeah.
Maybe with the Commanders. I'm just saying, if they feel Jaden Daniels is better, if they can accumulate more picks, they trade down to 2. The Commanders take Caleb. Chicago.
I mean, I would.
Could happen. But it's like we said, it's a 0.01% chance. For some reason,
we're just talking about surprises here. What could happen a couple of days?
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day,
it's pretty tough.
Caleb Williams is widely seen by everybody as one of the best quarterback prospects in years. I don't agree with that assessment from what I've seen. But like we said, people have paid a lot of money to do this evaluation. So, and I would also say that, you know, if you're not, if someone's that highly touted and you've got the first pick and you don't take them, like they've said at the start, it's career suicide. You know, you've got, even if he doesn't work out, you can just, if you go for another general manager job interview in 2, 3, 4, 5 years after rebuilding your resume, you can justify taking Caleb Williams at number one. Whereas I think if you rolled the dice with Drake May or Jaden Daniels or even JJ McCarthy at 1, that's a really difficult. Why did you take this quarter? And especially if Caleb Williams works out, you look like an idiot. So I think from a self-preservation perspective, he's the only choice at 1. I'd be absolutely stunned if it was anything other than him. Genuinely, I'd probably start drinking. But ultimately, yeah, it's got to be Caleb at 1. Jaden, the interest starts at 2, realistically. But yeah, you couldn't justify taking anybody else just from could you imagine the amount of grief you'd get from your own family?
It'd be more entertaining for us, though.
Oh God, could you viewing Twitter and the Instagram and stuff and the YouTube videos off the back of it would be, you know, just be Ryan Poles in a clown suit. There'd be some great memes available and all that. So from a banter perspective, it'd be incredible. What I do hope though is that the Bears just turn their card in as soon as the draft opens. It's already going to be a 6 a.m. finish for us on Thursday night, Friday morning. So if they could save us that 10 minutes of back and forth that they're not going to actually do anything with and just pick him at 9:40 or something with left on their pick clock, that'd be ideal. So we can actually move on to the interesting parts of the draft.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'd do? I'd be trading back to 2 or 3, trading back again and taking McCarthy.
We know that Dave
final opportunity. Well,
Dave's having 17 first-round picks every year. So.
I just think you should just completely dominate the draft. Like, I think you should set yourself up
Which
in
is
a
an
position
interesting
where
one because it's a gambler's philosophy. Because you've either got the guaranteed or you take a gamble that something's going to be better, and ultimately that's what the draft is, right? It's a crapshoot. plenty of quarterbacks, as we've discussed on a previous pod, have failed. Whether they've been picked at one or the first quarterback picked off the board. There's still jury out. The jury's still out on some of them. I mean, Trevor Lawrence looks like a franchise quarterback most of the time, and then he'll have a complete meltdown against someone like the Titans or the Colts or something like that, and looks terrible.
I just think that if a team can come out of this draft with JJ McCarthy and Byron Murphy the second. Is it Byron Murphy Jr.? Am I getting the two Byron Murphys mixed
Byron
up?
Murphy the second, I think.
Yeah, because we've already got Byron Murphy Jr. with the Vikings. If I can come out with those two players, I think, or John Newton, who's another absolute beast of a defensive tackle, and one of those QBs, and I don't mind if it's Drake May or JJ McCarthy or Jaden Daniels or Michael Penix Jr. for the Vikings, because I think we're set to help them be successful. I think we helped Kirk be successful, and I think if you can help Kirk be successful, then you could probably even make Sam Darnold look half decent. We'll see.
Well, there's a big case for Sam Darnold. I mean, there's a lot of, the NFL community is a lot, like the coaches and front office are a lot higher on Sam Darnold than probably anyone that's ever watched Sam Darnold play.
Yeah,
They still think there's untapped potential in there. I think he's only 26 or 27 or something like that. So he's not an old quarterback.
Nope.
And I think, when you saw him, it's interesting because Darnold played at USC and prior to Caleb. And when he was there, he was probably my first choice quarterback in that draft, to be honest.
I remember many a draft expert saying that Sam Darnold was the truth.
Well, the Jets traded up not knowing who they'd pick, assuming they were going to get Baker Mayfield when they traded up. And they couldn't believe that the Browns had passed on Sam Darnold, and they managed to pick him. Obviously, that didn't go fantastically well at the Jets, but it's the Jets, right? The Jets have been a mess for a decade.
They are the house of a rising sun. They have been the ruin of many a poor boy.
Zach Wilson failed. They've had to go to Aaron Rodgers.
Mark Sanchez was my favourite failure there.
Oh, yeah, butt fumble. Oh, that's the best. But Zach Wilson's failed. I mean, I think we probably could have predicted that, knowing if we knew what we knew now. And obviously they've gone to Aaron Rodgers now, who's managed a grand total of 3 snaps in a season, and he's completely make or break in this year for them. And obviously, if another injury happens, he's going to retire, and then the Jets are right back at the start. So I see the Jets loading up on offense. I think they're going to go Brock Bowers with their pick. Is my expectation, because they don't really have a top tight end there. But yeah, it's last word on these quarterbacks, because I feel like we've discussed them to death. But it's just a case of the pick your poison in this respect, and it's going to be probably the most interesting top of the first round that I've seen from a draft perspective in the last 10 years since I started, or 12 years since I started watching it. The last one I can remember being anywhere close to this was when Andrew Luck went at 1 and Washington traded the farm for Robert Griffin III.
And took Kirk in the 5th.
So, there's all of these elements, and it's just going to be a really, really interesting watch on Thursday.
The fact that Kirk was a 5th round pick and Mike McCartney has gotten him all this money is even more of a well done to him.
I'm sure I saw it's like $400 million guaranteed or something he's made in his career.
By the end of his career, he'll have earned more than Tom Brady in just contract money, is what they say.
And won one playoff game in that time.
I mean, it's incredible. The only player I can think of who's like earned more than he should have just off the back of talent, and then turned out he didn't have any kind of ability to hold up to the game, was another former Vikings quarterback, who's Sammy Bradford, who, when he played, looked like a world beater, but just couldn't ever get on the field, and degenerative knee problems. And I think he was the reason why the rookie wage scale got brought in, because he had a £75 million contract waiting for him when he first came into the NFL, and couldn't live up to it. So, yeah. So, right. But yeah, looking forward to Thursday. We've got a mock draft to do before then, though, haven't we? Which I'm also looking forward to, because Jim and I, and potentially you as well, Ollie, are going to take turns with it. And so
I'll be doing it.
Pigeons.
I'll be doing it, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
you two can fight it out for the Vikings pick.
That video will be out before draft night, obviously. Otherwise, there would be no point to the video. So that's our discussion. Just, we're all excited for the NFL draft. We're just getting our thoughts and feelings in this first episode before it starts on Friday morning for us. So thank you, punts and puntesses, for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe as we build up this UK American football community. Jim, Dave, pleasure as always. Thanks, lads.
Thank you.